Every day, millions of people travel from one city to another for businesses and leisure. For these kind of trips, one's options are fairly limited. You can either drive, take the train, or fly. All these modes of transportation have their respective strengths and weaknesses. Driving is convenient and comfortable, but it quickly becomes a chore for medium to long distance trips. Planes are great for long distance trips, but due to airport security and other factors, travelers often spend more time in the airport than flying. As such, they are not time efficient for short to medium distance trips. Trains bridges the gap between cars and planes perfectly. Unlike airplanes, they don't require an ridiculous amount of time stuck waiting for baggage checking and security, and unlike cars, they usually don't require any effort from the traveler, allowing them to do whatever they want along the journey. Thus, trains are the ideal mode of transport for trips between 300 to 700 kilometers. Coincidentally, many major North American cities can be found within this optimal range. Nicknamed the Quebec-Windsor Corridor, this area contains many major Canadian cities, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal to name a few. The corridor forms the economic and political heart of Canada, and every day, 10,000 travelers start their 600-kilometer journey from Montreal to Toronto. Clearly, there already exists strong travel demand for intercity trips in the corridor, yet Via Rail, the Canadian Public Rail Agency, only serves about 1,000 passengers on an average day. It is obvious to see that Via Rail is not as popular as it should be. So, what is stopping Via Rail from becoming Canadians' favorite mode of travel, and what are they doing to attract more travelers? As you probably already know, most railway tracks in North America are not owned by the government, nor by the passenger train company. It is owned by private freight companies. Companies like Canadian Pacific and Canadian Nationals owns the majority of the railroads in the country, and Via Rail simply contract these railways from the private companies. This might not seem like a big deal, as there are plenty of tracks over the country and there should be enough railway for everyone, right? The biggest problem with these contracts is that freight companies will get priority access to these railroads, and Via Rail is left as a second thought. Canadian passenger trains have to accommodate to freight trains, which means that when there is a scheduling conflict, freight train will get priority over Via Rail. With the amount of cargo being moved all over North America, Via trains would often get stuck in the middle of the track, waiting for it to be freed up. Via Rail's arrangement with the freight companies create frequent and significant delays for travelers, making Via Rail seems like an unreliable mode of transport. As I explained in a previous video, one of the biggest decision factors when it comes to transport mode choice is reliability. Cars, generally speaking, are a reliable mode of transport. While air travel can be a hit or miss sometimes, it is incomparable to the unreliability of the North American passenger train system. As such, passenger train services are often unpopular as a mode of transport, which is reflected in the extremely low daily ridership volume in an area with significant travel demand. The unpopularity of the railway service also makes it impossible for Via to turn a profit, relying on government subsidies to stay afloat. The lack of funding for Via makes it impossible to fundamentally eradicate the problem that plagues the company. Without funding, Via cannot purchase or build new tracks that it desperately needs to improve its service. It is stuck in a negative feedback loop with no way out. But there is hope for Via Rail. The government of Canada is very aware of Via's problem, and as such, they recently announced the very first phase of a new kind of rail service for Via, the high-frequency rail services. The project, which is still in the planning phases, will construct, upgrade, and purchase railroads in the corridor area. And by owning the tracks their trains run on, Via Rail will have a stronger control on the quality of the service it chooses to provide. Without the freight train clogging up the passenger rail network, Via Rail would also be able to maintain a level of reliability similar to other heavy rail services like subways or commuter rail services. Via would also able to run much frequent services in the corridor, hence the name of the project. After the project completion, the Toronto-Montreal route will run once per hour compared to the current 5 trips per day. The project will also enable VIA to run much faster services. Currently, under optimal conditions, it will take about 6 hours to drive from Montreal to Toronto. If the HFR service is established, VIA Rail will be able to run trains at a maximum speed of 200 km per hour, which will greatly reduce the travel time from 6 hours to 3.5 hours. The frequency, reliability, and speed HFR will provide to VIA will be priceless. It will make passenger trains a competitive mode of transport in the corridor, generating much needed revenue and goodwill for the company. In fact, it will pretty much solve all the problems VIA Rail is currently facing. Not only HFR will solve the reliability problems, the additional revenue generated by such a service would allow VIA to sustain its mission to provide an affordable mode of transport for remote communities without over-reliance on government funding. From building extravagant castle hotels across the continent, to a company that is now largely dependent on government subsidies, passenger rail companies in North America have certainly seen better days. Due to factors outside of its control, VIA Rail is perceived as an unreliable mode of transport and is in dire need of an upgrade. The federal government's HFR project will certainly bring back some of the former glory of the Canadian passenger rail services. While there is no telling whether this project will actually happen, it proposes a sensible solution to the many problems faced by VIA Rail. Hey folks, thanks for watching yet another video. If you have enjoyed, please consider to leave a like and subscribe. As always, this is the Transportation Channel, and I'll see you next time.